Judah and Tamar. The shocking scandal revealed that miraculously fulfilled God's sacred promise. In the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, the narrative unfolds in the land of Canaan, where Judah, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, found himself far from the blessings bestowed upon his lineage. In a departure from his heritage, he took a Canaanite woman named Shua as his wife, and she bore him 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. As years passed in this foreign land, Judah's heart drifted further away from the covenantal promises of his ancestors. However, calamity struck Judah's household when his eldest son, grew to prove wicked in the sight of the Lord. In judgment, God struck him dead, leaving behind his widow Tamar in a vulnerable state, stripped of the protections bestowed by marriage. Judah, adhering to the customs passed down through generations, summoned Onan, his second son, for the levirate duty, urging him to marry Tamar and raise offspring in his brother's name. But Onan, entangled in the desires of the flesh, resisted this sacred calling, choosing instead to heed his own inclinations. As he refused to fulfill his duty, God's anger burned against him, and he too met a swift demise. Tamar was left bereft once again, double the sorrow, double the loss. With no husband, no protector, and no legacy to call her own, her dignity and future lay precariously balanced in the weights of societal scorn. In desperation, Tamar devised a plan that pierced through the customs that sought to confine her. Disguising herself in the garments of a cult prostitute, she positioned herself at the entrance of Enaim, laying in wait for the very man who had abandoned her fate, Judah himself. When Judah approached her, driven by desire and a heart heavy with grief, he was unaware that this woman was his own daughter-in-law. He pledges her with his staff and signet as a promise, departing without realizing the gravity of his act. Days turned into a tense hush until the revelation thundered forth. Tamar was with child. Judah's indignation erupted at the news, commanding, "Bring her out," in his rage, not knowing that he had condemned the one chosen for the redemption of his lineage. Yet as the flames of judgment beckoned, Tamar produced the staff and signet, unraveling the truth. "Judah," she declared, "I am with child by the man who owns these." In that moment Judah's heart was laid bare, stripped of pride and cloaked in revelation. "She is more righteous than I," he confessed, his voice thick with the weight of conviction. As Tamar gave birth, she brought forth twins, Perez and Zerah. From this scandalous union, a line would emerge that would carry the scepter of Judah, fulfilling the sacred promise that the kingship would never depart from his lineage. Before we continue with this incredible biblical account, I want to make sure you don't miss any of these powerful scripture stories. Click the bell icon and select all notifications. These biblical narratives have transformed countless lives throughout history. If God's word through this story is blessing you, please like and share with someone who needs to hear about God's faithfulness today. Tell me in the comments, which biblical story has most impacted your faith journey? I'm always amazed how God's word speaks to hearts across generations. Now let's continue with what the Lord did next. As the echoes of conflict faded, Judah pondered the unthinkable. How could God's promises ring true through such scandalous twists of fate? What did this union mean for the future of God's people? The mystery of God's sovereignty loomed large, beckoning the faithful to delve deeper into a narrative rife with divine purpose, a testament to the unfathomable paths through which God weaves his extraordinary plans amidst human frailty. In the days that followed the birth of the twins, the repercussions of Tamar's bold actions resonated through the households of Judah. As the dust settled, the pain of loss and regret intertwined with the thread of hope woven into the fabric of God's divine narrative. Judah, transformed by the revelation of truth, began to regard his daughter-in-law with newfound reverence. With the blessing of his household renewed, Judah summoned his family and sought reconciliation. He spoke words of truth and repentance. "Tamar, though the world may scorn you, the hand of the Almighty has worked through your plight. I have learned that his ways are higher than our ways." And so it was that Judah began to honor both Tamar and her children, pledging himself to restore the lineage he had nearly forsaken. The shame that once shadowed his heart now turned into a cautious optimism, for he perceived that God was moving through their lives in ways he could scarcely understand. As time passed, Perez grew strong and steadfast. He became a man of valor, embodying the legacy that God had intended to rise forth from the ashes of scandal. His reputation spread throughout the land, a flame igniting loyalty and admiration among his kin. Conversely, Zerah, the twin who had reached for the red thread first, struggled against the currents of fate, yet held the call of God deep within him. Yet, unbeknownst to Judah, the lives of his sons were interconnected with a greater destiny. The shadows of impending trials loomed on the horizon, for even as the families united and their hearts turned toward heaven, a storm was about to descend upon their lives, a reminder of the world's enmity toward the plan of the Almighty. Meanwhile, the whispers of the Canaanite lands grew louder, as the influence of idol worship threatened the hearts of God's people. The children of Israel were being led astray, abandoning the covenant of their forefathers. Judah, now a man transformed, felt a growing urgency within his spirit. He turned to his family and said, "We must remember the covenant of our fathers, lest we drift into darkness. The Lord our God is a jealous God. We are called to keep his commands and walk in his ways." In his heart, he grappled with fears for his children, particularly for Perez, the promised one. Judah prayed fervently, offering sacrifices and seeking the Lord's guidance. Day by day he would dust his feet by the altar, presenting his supplications before the divine. The Lord heard his cries, and in a vision one night he declared, "The path of your lineage shall lead to the Redeemer. Great will be the tribulations, yet they are the birthing pains of the promise." Judah awoke. The fire of God's promises ignited within him, filling his heart with an assurance that despite the trials ahead, the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob would not perish. He resolved to teach his sons the ways of the Lord, instilling in them the truth that God's faithful love could conquer all transgressions. As the sun set behind the hills, a whisper beckoned in the nights to come. What lay ahead for the household of Judah, the tribulations they would endure, and the fulfillment of that divine promise through the very lineage that had once stumbled in sin. Their journey was just beginning, for the providential hand of God was directing their steps toward the unfolding of his grand design, a design that would echo through generations and reverberate in hearts yet unknown. Preparation was necessary. The world was waiting for the one who would break chains and restore hope. Until that day, the story of Judah and Tamar was but the prologue to a greater tale of salvation yet to be revealed. And it came to pass in the days after Judah's steadfast commitment to the Lord's covenant that a great testing arose. The land became troubled, for famine swept over the region like a dark cloud, bringing with it fear and desperation. The people of Canaan and even the families of Israel grew anxious, for their farms yielded no harvest, and the stores began to dwindle. Judah, perceiving the difficulty that loomed over their homes, summoned his sons to gather. "Hear me, my children, for the hand of the Lord has stirred the earth. We must go into Egypt and seek provisions to sustain our household, lest we perish from the land. The time has come for us to venture beyond the borders and find sustenance." As they journeyed toward Egypt, the heart of Judah was filled with both dread and hope. He could not escape the weight of the vision that had been revealed to him, a promise woven through the very thread of their existence that whispered of deliverance, yet it seemed overshadowed by the trials that now lay before them. When they arrived in Egypt, they were met with a stern ruler, wise in the ways of governance, who harbored a secret of his own. The ruler was none other than Joseph, whom they had cast into a pit, sold into slavery, now elevated to a position of prominence, entrusted with the food of many lands. Thus the very brother whom they betrayed stood sovereign over their fate, unknowingly entangled in the divine tapestry being woven by the Lord. Joseph's heart stirred within him as he beheld his brethren, though they knew him not. He sought to test their spirits, asking harshly, "You are spies, come to see the nakedness of the land." Fear gripped the sons of Jacob, and they pleaded, "Nay, my lord, we are all one man's sons, we are honest men." But Joseph persisted, discerning a need to sift through their hearts. Days turned into tension-filled moments, for Joseph commanded them to bring their youngest brother Benjamin to prove their truthfulness. Despair settled over Judah, for he remembered the dark shadows of their past and the promise he made to their father, Jacob. "If harm should befall him," Judah lamented, "I will bear that guilt forever." In his heart, Judah felt the weight of his family's legacy pressing upon him, the echoes of redemption through suffering beginning to unfold. And in the stillness of their troubled journey, a revelation began to bloom. God was orchestrating a reunion, a restoration that would lead not only them but generations through the wilderness into the light of his promise. And Judah spoke boldly to Joseph, "Take me instead of the lad. I cannot see the sorrow of my father again," thus revealing the depth of his transformation. In this moment of selflessness, the path to reconciliation began to unfurl, the very act that would lead to the deliverance of his lineage. In this divine encounter, the thread of God's sovereign plan looped together the fates of brothers, long separated by sin, pain, and despair. The tapestry of life was draped with the hues of both sacrificial love and grace. For in their darkest hour, God set in motion a plan of redemption that would not only save their lives but ultimately guide them toward the birth of one who would break the chains binding all of humanity. But what Judah did not know was that another revelation awaited just beyond the horizon, a truth that the heavens would declare in resounding glory, binding the fate of Israel to the overarching fabric of divine destiny. The heart of the Almighty was preparing to reveal a name that would echo through time, promising salvation to all who would believe. And it came to pass after Judah made this great sacrifice that curiosity entwined with trepidation lingered in the hearts of his brothers. They beheld each other in silence, the weight of their past sins flooding their thoughts. Joseph, still concealed beneath the mantle of authority, noticed their troubled spirits and, with a heavy heart, sought to further unveil the truth hidden within their souls. Joseph commanded that they be brought to his hall, where he would discern their intentions. He lifted his gaze to them and said, "You have spoken the truth of your lineage, yet I will show you a sign, a revelation that will illuminate what lies within your hearts." As he spoke, the air hung thick with expectancy, as the brothers sensed the tides of their fate were on the cusp of a great turning. He ordered his steward to fill their sacks with food, but instructed, "Place each man's money back in the mouth of his sack." The brothers departed, unaware of the intention behind this act, a divine test unbeknownst to them, driving the narrative of their reconciliation ever deeper. As they returned to their father in Canaan, a sorrowful burden settled upon them as they opened their sacks. Behold, each man found his money, and fear surged through them. They looked to one another in panic, exclaiming, "What is this that God hath done unto us?" Their hearts quaked at the thought of returning to Egypt, for not only must they bring Benjamin, but they fared now with perceived thievery upon their heads. Time passed, and the famine pressed heavily upon them, increasing the desperation within their home. Jacob, sensing their distress, questioned, "Why did you tell the man you had a brother? Why have you done this to me?" Judah felt the piercing conviction and replied, "The man did strictly charge us, saying, 'You shall not see my face except your brother be with you.'" In this moment of acknowledgement, Judah grasped at the edges of his responsibility, feeling the legacy of his earlier transgressions weighing upon his spirit. Amidst the gathering storm of their circumstances, Judah turned to his father with fervor. "Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, for we and also our little ones. I will be surety for him. I will bear the blame forever if I do not bring him back." In that moment, the spirit of sacrifice flared within him once more, revealing a heart renewed in purpose and willingness to shield his family. At length Jacob resigned and said, "If it must be so, do this. Take of the best fruits in the land in your vessels, and carry down the man a present." The brothers prepared their offering, laden with guilt and hope, and journeyed back to Egypt, understanding that their lives depended on a thread woven with both honesty and redemption. When they arrived, Joseph beheld them and ordered a feast to be prepared. The brothers trembled, acknowledging their unworthiness as they entered the house of the man who had held their lives in his hands. As they dined, Joseph's heart ached at the sight of Benjamin, whose presence unveiled layers of sorrow and joy, drawing him closer to a revelation. At the climax of the banquet, Joseph could contain his emotions no more. He stepped away hidden, and he wept for the bond rediscovered amidst the shadows of sin. How glorious was God's providence! A grand reunion loomed on the horizon, traced in the fabric of divine love awaiting its consummation. But even as hope flickered like a candle's flame, unseen still lingered a deeper mystery, a divine purpose entwining the fate of Israel with a promise of deliverance yet to be unveiled. The realization approached like dawn, heralding a name that echoing resurrection, beckoning them towards an unforeseen future, wherein the hearts of many would turn back to the Almighty, who would declare through time everlasting, "I will be their God, and they shall be my people." And it came to pass, as Joseph returned to the feast, his heart steadfast yet trembling with the weight of unspoken truths, he commanded the steward of his house, saying, "Set the table before these men according to their birthright, and hold Benjamin as the last." The brothers sat in astonishment as they were arranged from the firstborn to the youngest, baffled by the evident knowledge of their parentage. Fear mingled with awe within them as they wondered how the man who held their fate could possess such insight. They exchanged wary glances, each feeling the shadows of their past closing in on their hearts. Joseph approached the table, and as he served them, he could no longer contain his longing. He inquired of them, "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spake? Is he yet alive?" Upon hearing these words, the brothers responded with solemnity, "Thy servant our father is in good health, he is yet alive." Instinctively, Joseph turned to Benjamin, the son of his own mother, and the wellspring of emotion surged within him as he beheld the flickering light of hope mirrored in the youth's eyes. In that moment, Joseph lifted his cup and blessed it, invoking the favor of the God of his forefathers. He took a sip and proclaimed, "God, blessed be thy name. Let my brothers find favor in thy sight." A sense of divine purpose swathed the room, as the brothers felt the weight of their sins juxtaposed against the grace enfolding them. Yet as they feasted, Joseph devised a plan intended to unveil their hearts further. He ordered his steward, saying, "Put my silver cup in the sack of the youngest along with his money." The steward obeyed, and the brothers departed back towards Canaan with joy, their fears momentarily quelled. But not far into their journey, the steward overtook them, his voice resounding like thunder. "Wherefore have ye rewarded evil for good? The man's cup in which he divines is missing." Panic gripped the hearts of the brothers, and they hastily returned, crying out, "What shall we say unto my lord? How shall we clear ourselves?" When Joseph summoned them to his presence, his heart thick with emotion and feigned anger, he addressed them, "I have acquired the right to divination through this vessel. He who possesses it shall become my servant." The brothers pleaded, their hearts breaking, "We will be your servants if you find your cup with us." In that hour Judah stepped forward, courage rising within him, and he pled for mercy, recounting the suffering of their father and their own transgressions. "O my Lord, let thy servant abide instead of the lad, for how shall we return to our father without the boy?" Joseph observed the fervent plea and the willingness to bear the burden for Benjamin. The tears that had once hidden within him now poured forth, revealing both the weight of his love and the anguish of his desire for reconciliation. With a voice unyielding yet tender, he proclaimed, "I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live?" The brothers stood aghast, for their hearts trembled in fear at the man revealed before them, the brother they had once cast aside. With a strength born from anguish and hope, Joseph extended his hand and declared, "Come near to me. Fear not, for what ye meant for evil, God intended for good, to bring much people alive." In that sacred moment of reunion, the veils of bitterness began to part, revealing a divine thread weaving together their fates. Yet even in this, a deeper mystery lingered, a foretelling yet unfurling in the hearts of the sons of Jacob, as God's plan for Israel would lead them not only to reconciliation, but toward a destiny filled with deliverance and promise. Thus, as he embraced them, heaven beckoned, for even in their darkest hour the words of the Almighty echoed through the ages. "So shall my covenant be established, and all nations shall know that I am the Lord. A name shall rise among you, a shield of hope, for my people shall walk in their inheritance." And Joseph could scarcely contain the tempest within him as his brothers drew near, their faces shadows of terror and disbelief. He spoke gently, yet with the authority of one who had suffered greatly. "I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt," he proclaimed. And with these words a silence fell upon them like a weighty shroud. As they beheld the man before them, it dawned upon them that the brother they had forsaken now stood as ruler over them. Their hearts were crushed beneath the weight of their guilt, and they were speechless, paralyzed by the chain of past sins that gripped their very souls. Joseph, perceiving their confusion, continued, "Do not be distressed, nor let your hearts be troubled that ye sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life." His voice resonated with conviction, a testament to the unyielding hand of providence. "For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be plowing nor harvest." In that moment, the threads of God's sovereignty began to intertwine before their eyes. Joseph shared with them the vision of a coming restoration. "God sent me before you to establish a remnant upon the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. He hath made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt." The brothers fell to their knees, trembling before him, recognizing not just the weight of their past, but the mercy of God that had unfolded before them in unimaginable ways. As the fear in their hearts began to dissipate, hope dared to emerge from the ashes of despair. "Come, go up to my father, and say unto him, Joseph thy son hath made known unto us that God hath made him lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, tarry not, and thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks, and thy herds, and all that thou hast." Joseph urged, his heart swelling with love for the family he thought forever lost. His brothers responded in humble gratitude, "We are thy servants." There, amidst the sorrow of the past and the dawning of the future, Joseph fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck, weeping, the love between the sons of Jacob flowing freely, bonding them anew. And as they shared their sorrows and joys, the bond of brotherhood was restored, not just forged by blood, but by the divine purpose unfolding before them. The word of their reunion spread rapidly, and soon Pharaoh himself rejoiced at the news and commanded Joseph to bring Jacob and all his kin to Egypt to dwell in safety. Yet even as this reconciliation unfolded, a deeper mystery lingered, for the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob echoed through the ages. The revelation of God's purpose for Israel began to unfold in these sacred moments, whispering of a future that spanned beyond their understanding. Thus it came to pass that Joseph's family journeyed toward Egypt, a testament to God's unyielding promise. The path was set for deliverance, not merely from famine, but for the very birth of a nation destined to bear witness to the glory of the Lord. In their hearts dwelled a stirring of faith, for an unseen hand directed their steps into a future where deliverance awaited. The promise of God resonated, growing ever louder. "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace, and not of evil, to give you an expected end." And Jacob, their father, having received the words of his sons, was stirred within him. He could hardly believe what he heard, the news that Joseph, whom he mourned as dead, was alive and ruler of Egypt. His heart raced as memories of loss collided with a spark of hope. "Is it true?" he asked, as if too great was the joy to comprehend. "Yea, our brother Joseph is alive," they proclaimed amidst joyful tears. "He commanded us to bring thee to him, that we may dwell together." And they recounted unto Jacob all the words that Joseph had said unto them. As the sun began to set, casting golden rays upon the land, Jacob drew strength from the promise unfolding before him. He was resolved to go down to Egypt, not merely to escape the famine, but to reunite with the son he thought lost. He gathered his household and prepared to embark upon the journey, laden with both grief and expectation. Meanwhile, Joseph, knowing the depths of his father's heart, sent chariots to meet Jacob, a symbol of honor and the restoration of their family. He offered gifts, provisions, and all that was needed for the long journey ahead. The chariots moved swiftly, cutting through the land as a shadow overtaking the sun, bearing tidings of reconciliation and fulfillment. Upon arriving at Beersheba, Jacob paused to offer sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. There, under the vast expanse of the heavens, God spoke to him in a vision of the night. "Jacob, Jacob," the voice called, and he answered, "Here am I." The Lord comforted him, saying, "Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will make of thee a great nation there. I will go down with thee into Egypt, and I will also surely bring thee up again." Awakened and filled with divine assurance, Jacob pressed onward, his heart now unburdened. His family gathered, and they journeyed forth, the thought of reunion strengthening their resolve. As they approached Egypt, the air crackled with anticipation, the hearts of all beating as one toward the anticipated embrace. In the throne room of Pharaoh, the news spread swiftly. Joseph's brothers had arrived alongside their father, believing they walked into history to fulfill God's unwavering promise. Joseph prepared himself, for he could scarcely contain the tears of joy that threatened to spill forth. And at last he beheld them, his father and his brethren, his heart swelling within him like an overflowing well. Joseph ran to meet Jacob, falling upon his neck in fervent embrace, his tears washing away years of sorrow. As Jacob wept, he declared, "Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive." The reverberations of their reunion echoed throughout the land, stirring hearts and reminding all of the hand of providence. And Joseph brought his family before Pharaoh, who marveled at their presence. "What is your occupation?" Pharaoh inquired. They humbly answered, "Thy servants are shepherds." Thus, through divine orchestration, they were granted the land of Goshen, where they would flourish. Yet amid this celebration, shadows whispered truths of the future, for God's promise would stretch beyond the present joy. The descendants of Jacob would multiply in Egypt, and the initial acceptance would turn to hardship, leading to a divine necessity for deliverance. As they settled into the land, Jacob's heart swelled with gratitude, yet a question lingered in the air, echoing like an unanswered prayer. How would this family of promise find its way back to the land of their forefathers? Little did they know, a divine plan was being formed, one that would weave generations together for the fulfillment of God's sacred covenant with his people. The time of their trial was yet to come, and in that looming darkness, a rich tapestry of redemption would unfold. And it came to pass that Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. Jacob's family, once a small band of wanderers, flourished amidst the bounty of Egypt. Yet within the heart of Jacob stirred a solemn weight, for he understood the frailty of man and the shifting tides of fortune. As the years flowed like the waters of the Nile, Joseph remained faithful, overseeing the affairs of Pharaoh and providing for his family. Yet the shadows of oppression began to rise, creeping into the lives of the children of Israel, and the memory of their former freedom became but a faint echo in the vast halls of Egyptian power. And Joseph's brothers engaged in the task set before them, living in the comfort of their newfound land, yet a lingering sense of unease settled upon them. The famine had ceased, but whispers of discontent brewed within the hearts of the Egyptians, who looked upon the Israelites with envy and suspicion. In time, a new Pharaoh arose, one who did not remember Joseph, nor the kindness that he had extended to the land of Egypt. The winds of change swept across the people, and a bitter decree was proclaimed. "Let the sons of Jacob be made subjects to us, lest they rise against us," he declared. And thus began the bondage of Israel. Jacob, now aged and weary, felt the suffering of his people as a heavy stone upon his heart. He gathered his sons and said unto them, "Gather here, for I sense the trials that shall come upon us. We are a people chosen, and yet our days in this land may turn to mourning. What shall we do?" Judah, bold and resolute, responded, "Our strength lies not in despair, but in the covenant our God made with our forefathers. We must remember his promises and cling to him in this darkness." And Jacob, hearing the words of his son, prayed fervently. In prayer he recalled the promise spoken to him at Beersheba, when God assured him that he would be made into a great nation. With renewed resolve he stirred the hearts of his sons, leading them to seek the Lord in earnestness. Then, in a moment unseen by the eyes of the world, God stirred. A child was born among the Israelites, a boy named Moses, whom God had destined to be a deliverer. Unbeknownst to all, his life would intertwine with the fates of the Egyptians and the Israelites, a life set apart for divine purpose. As time passed, the cries of the Israelites ascended toward heaven, and God, ever faithful, remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He had seen their affliction, he had heard their cries, and his heart was moved by their burdens. But even as hardship loomed, God's plans were unfolding in ways invisible to man. For even in the darkness he was preparing a miraculous path of deliverance. The whispers of hope began to stir among the people. "The Lord shall bring us forth, for he is our God." And as Jacob watched his family struggle, he knew not of the flame of passion ignited within Moses, nor of the mighty acts that would unfold by divine hand. He trusted in the promise. Little could he foresee that the liberation of his descendants was to be a great story of redemption, unfolding through trials and the relentless pursuit of the God who claims his own. Thus, even in their pain, the children of Israel remained a people poised for promise. They awaited their deliverer, while the stars in the celestial dome bore witness to a divine plan that was far greater than mere survival. It was an everlasting covenant, drawing them toward a future filled with hope and glory. For what Jacob could not fathom was that the path to liberation would lead through a wilderness, and the trials they were to face would be but the prelude to something magnificent, the redemption of a people chosen to be a light unto nations yet to come. And it came to pass that in the midst of Israel's plight and the heavy hand of oppression pressing down upon them, the hopes of the children of Israel grew dim, yet the divine plan continued to take shape in the background. For within the quiet realm of obscure daily toil, Jacob's family entered a new chapter, marked by both heartache and the unfolding of God's purposes. Moses grew in stature and wisdom, a child marked by the favor of God, hidden within the confines of Egyptian courts, where he received both knowledge and culture far removed from his people. Yet daily, a fire burned within him, a yearning for his kin, the oppressed ones who cried out for deliverance. His heart, though educated in the palace of Pharaoh, belonged to the covenant people of his forefathers. One day, as he watched his people labor under the fierce taskmasters, an anger surged within him. A vision of justice rose in his heart, and he could hold it no longer. In a moment of fervor, he struck down an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew. The deed was done in secrecy, yet the echo of his actions reverberated through the years. The next day, when he sought to mediate a quarrel between two Hebrews, he was met with disdain. "Who made you a prince and a judge over us?" they retorted, and in their words, the weight of rejection fell heavy upon Moses' soul. Fearing the repercussions of his act, he fled to the land of Midian, where he would dwell in solitude, away from the pressures of Pharaoh's house. In the wilderness, surrounded by the silence of the barren land, Moses encountered God at the foot of Mount Horeb, a burning bush that blazed without being consumed. The Lord spoke to him, saying, "Moses, Moses, I have seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cries because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them." And Moses, filled with awe and trepidation, asked, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring out the children of Israel?" But God reassured him, "Certainly I will be with you." Thus, relics of the old covenant were revived. Promises made to Abraham and Isaac were now taking on flesh through Moses. As Moses returned to Egypt, the hearts of the Israelites were weary yet longing for the glimpse of hope. His brother Aaron accompanying him, they gathered the elders of Israel to convey the message of their God, who had seen and remembered their plight. The elders listened, and believing in the voice of the God who spoke, they bowed their heads and worshipped. Yet even as the first whispers of deliverance stirred hope within the hearts of the Israelites, Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He scoffed at their plea, demanding, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice?" The oppression grew heavier, and the Israelites felt the weight of despair once more. But God had not forgotten the covenant made with their ancestors. Through Moses and Aaron, he would display his mighty hand and strong arm, a testament to his sovereign authority over Egypt and all false gods. As tensions swelled, the Lord promised to show wonders and signs that would reclaim his people, not only for their freedom, but for the glory of his name among the nations. Thus, the stage was set for a confrontation, a divine battle that would unfurl as the destiny of nations was being shaped. Unbeknownst to Moses, the path of freedom would not come without trials and the shaking of foundations. Each act of divine intervention would echo through generations. The hearts of the people were about to witness the awesome might of their God. For what they could not foresee was that the road to liberation lay entwined with God's intricate tapestry of promise, a pattern woven through silence and suffering, rich with the hope that shattered despair. Yet they longed still for the final revelation. What magnificent end awaited the children of Israel as the Almighty prepared to unfurl his redemptive plan. And so it came to pass that the stage was set for the great liberating acts of God. The fervent cries of Israel ascended, echoing through the heavens, seeking the deliverance promised to their forefathers. Moses stood before Pharaoh, uncertain yet emboldened by the assurance of God's presence. "Let my people go," he declared, exhilarating with the authority granted from on high, a command that would ripple through the very fabric of history. But Pharaoh's heart was hard as granite, and he met the Almighty's decree with contempt. "Who is the Lord that I should heed his voice?" he jeered, unaware that his defiance would be the precursor to his downfall. And with each rejection, the weight of the plagues descended upon Egypt like a relentless storm. Rivers turned to blood, the land swarmed with frogs, gnats, and flies, livestock felled, boils festered upon men and beasts, hail rained from the skies, and locusts devoured what remained. Each plague served not just as a judgment upon the Egyptians, but as a clarion call to the Israelites, a resounding confirmation of God's splendor and power, proclaiming that deliverance was indeed at hand. Even in the midst of judgment, the Lord's intention was clear: to liberate his people, to reclaim them as his own. Amidst the turmoil, God unveiled the final act of deliverance. The Lord instructed Moses to prepare the people. "This month shall be to you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year. Speak unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house. And if the house be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it, according to the number of the souls." Thus the Passover was ordained, with blood from the sacrificial lamb marking the doorposts of the faithful, a vivid sign of salvation and protection, linking the past to a future of hope. "When I see the blood, I will pass over you," promised the Lord, captivating hearts with the promise of life amidst death. As the 12th night approached, hearts pounded with anticipation and dread. At midnight the decree of the Lord fell like a heavy hand upon Egypt, as the firstborn of every household breathed their final breath, except for those marked by the blood of the Lamb. The wails of sorrow pierced the night, echoing through the land, a mourning that would carve its place in the annals of history. And in the moment of divine judgment, the hearts of the Egyptians shattered. Fear gripped Pharaoh, shaking him to the core. "Rise up and get you forth from among my people," he commanded Moses and Aaron in terror, "for I have lost my firstborn son to your God." As the sun graced the horizon, a new chapter unfurled. The Israelites gathered laden with the treasures of Egypt, silver and gold, unearned and abundant, bestowed in the wake of liberation. "They shall go forth with great substance," God declared, "for the riches of the nations would be transfigured into his purposes." Moses led them forth, inspired by divine resolve, across the threshold of their bondage into the wilderness, a land uninhabited, vast yet filled with the echo of promise. Every step was a declaration of faith, every breath a renewal of hope. But even as they departed, a new challenge loomed. Pharaoh's heart also turned again, inflamed with vengeance. "What have we done?" he bellowed. "We have let them go from serving us." And he summoned his chariots, pursuing the Israelites with furious intent. As they approached the Red Sea, fear seized the hearts of the people. "What shall we do? Have you brought us out here to die?" they lamented, their faith tested on the shores of despair. But the Lord spoke through Moses, "Fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever." In that moment, the breath of God swept across the waters, parting the sea, creating a pathway of dry ground for his people to cross. The Israelites moved with trepidation yet faith, witnessing the splendor of God unfurl before their eyes, knowing they were walking through the very heart of deliverance, while the waters loomed like sentinels at their sides. As they reached the other side, the moment of divine retribution fell upon Pharaoh and his army. The waters returned, crashing down upon them, consuming the might of Egypt and sealing the fate of their oppression forever. An awe-inspiring shout of victory rose from the Israelites, a song of deliverance, stirring deep within their souls, praising God for the might of his hand. Moses led them in song, extolling the victorious power of the Lord. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. And thus began a journey of the redeemed, a voyage of transformation, a pilgrimage to a land flowing with milk and honey, promised to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As they traversed the wilderness, the people learned to rely on the Lord. They gathered manna as a daily provision, a testament to God's unending faithfulness. Water surged from flint, and his presence went before them as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, guiding their way into the heart of the covenant. But even as they journeyed forth, trials and testing met them along the path. Complaints arose, hearts wavered, faith flickered like a candle in the winds of uncertainty. Yet with each challenge, God reinforced his commitment to them, revealing his covenantal intentions and nurturing their spirits. In a sacred mountain, he met with Moses and etched his laws upon stone, gracing his people with a blueprint for righteous living, a divine instruction that would endure through the ages, binding them closer unto himself. Yet, the journey was fraught with the dangers of disobedience, of drifting away from his ways. These stories of struggle and redemption wove together, bringing forth a narrative that would echo through generations, as they would recall the faithfulness of God and the deliverance he wrought through his mighty hand. With every story, every sin and act of grace, a future was woven, a hope awaiting fulfillment that would see the curtain raised on the grand narrative of salvation unfolding across history, a Redeemer who would come out of the lineage of Judah through the scars of struggle to reclaim his people from darkness. Thus, as we reflect on these profound truths, let us remember the incredible arc of God's salvation. Friends, the mighty hand of God has extended through the ages, inviting us into his unfathomable grace and love. You need to subscribe now to stay connected to God's word and not miss these transformative stories, stories that have changed hearts and transformed lives. Please take a moment to leave a like now to help spread God's word through the algorithm. Your engagement invites others into the truth and love of Christ. Share your reflections in the comments. We want to hear how this biblical journey has impacted your faith. And don't wait even one more second to share this powerful testimony with at least 5 friends who need to encounter the truth of God's love. Join us in spreading the light of his incredible faithfulness.